What's up? It's EJ Spark here with a full review, or my thoughts as I like to say, of this new Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers album. Obviously, this was a very highly anticipated album from Kendrick Lamar. This is his 5th solo full-length studio album, or 6th if you count the untitled, unmastered compilation album, and first album in 5 years since Damn, which won the Pulitzer Prize. So big expectations to fill here for Kendrick Lamar. This album, supposedly a double album with 18 songs and 2 interludes, and I'll tell you off the bat, nothing short of absolute stellar. You know, a lot has happened since we've seen Kendrick Lamar. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the pandemic, the presidential election, and so much more has occurred. So obviously, naturally, people are going to expect a lot of substance from Kendrick Lamar, and that is exactly what we get with this record. Now, Kendrick does touch on many themes and topics throughout this album. Historically, Kendrick is a very conscious rapper, especially on the record To Pimp a Butterfly. He has told great stories and has had so much emotion of what is going on in the world. I'd say while we still have many conscious efforts on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, like on songs N95, touching on COVID and the pandemic, of course, and especially, you know, throughout Mother Isober, we have a more personal and raw Kendrick Lamar on this album, which is something I personally always tend to be pulled to when an artist shows their real, raw, emotional side. They're being so vulnerable for us, the audience, even though I do believe he's making this music really for himself, as I will touch upon later in this breakdown. But he touches on family and religion and love, relationships, and personal growth, and surprisingly, like I said before, the pandemic. In general, I would say this is his most introspective album yet because of all that he says within the 18 tracks of this record. I feel like I'm going to need to listen to this 5 more times to really get the best grip on what he is saying throughout the album, because he could have a whole lot to say in just 2 bars of one song, which I think is something that makes Kendrick Lamar so good. Kendrick Lamar is such an intelligent rapper, you really have to digest what he is saying word for word, bar for bar. This album, to me, is Kendrick Lamar's growth. I mean, how are you going to follow up an album like To Pimp a Butterfly and Damn, which won the Pulitzer Prize? So he had to take a step back for those 5 years and experience life and grow even more than he already has. He had to take that step back. You know, one of the biggest topics that he touched upon on this LP is how he is not a savior and how he does have so much pressure out there because so many people do look at him like an inspiration or just a huge idol or hero. He knows that he's considered one of, if not the best rapper of all time. You know, he does try to take some of that pressure off of himself by saying he is human, and we hear this especially on the haunting song Crown, where he does repeat he can't please everybody all the time, knowing damn well you can't appeal to all 8 billion people on this planet. And I think that's something very relatable because everybody wants to be liked and everybody wants to be loved. And I think, you know, to mirror that to us as quote unquote regular people, we also have to come with the terms that not everyone is going to like us. We are not going to appeal to everyone. And we also hear this on the final song Mirror, where he says pressure is taking over him. Pressure is looming over him. He knows he is a hero to so many people. But he does say he chooses him on this very uplifting instrumental. This instrumental is definitely a vibe. But he chooses him. He chooses his family, his personal life over the fans. He really makes the music, in my opinion, for himself. And he's not just going to put out an album because the fans want it. He is going to take his time and write his truth with his penmanship. And that is why his pen is so good. And that's not to say he doesn't care about us, the fans. But he's going to take time with his music and stay in his matrix, as he even says, and just keep his personal life private. We know he's not, you know, huge on social media or in the limelight a lot. Another topic he touches upon quite a bit is the way he was brought up. Obviously, he has talked about that quite a bit in his career, especially in the song Father Time, which I think is one of the best cuts on this whole record, where he touches upon his daddy issues and how he was brought up to be a man and that he hid his emotions. And that made him question the Drake and Kanye beef and how they actually came back together and squashed that beef. And he was confused on how that could happen, because I don't know if Kendrick knows if he would have been able himself to squash that type of beef. And I think that that is such an interesting perspective, because this album is supposed to be about Kendrick Lamar's personal growth. It's supposed to be about the maturity that he's gained over the last 5 years. And it is about that. It is about the growth and maturity, but he still says he thinks he has more growth to do. And he says he must have more healing to do if that's the case. And I think that whole paradox right there shows how much Kendrick has grown. He also does mention cancel culture quite a bit and how much the world has changed since he was a kid, especially on the very controversial song Auntie Diaries, where he does talk about his aunt becoming a man. And he says how they used to say a homophobic slur, and he does repeat that multiple times on this record, which is why this specific song is very controversial. And that song would get anyone canceled these days, but he does say how nobody knew better back in the day, and it was never meant to be harmful. And I think these days there is a very fine line with cancel culture between, saying something as a kid and not knowing what it means and just not knowing any better, and actually meaning it maliciously in today's day and age. And I'm very interested to see how the public will take this one in general. The stories that he has on this album just feel so very real, and we really see that on We Cry Together with Taylour Paige. I think this is one of the most unique songs of all time. I mean, this song is a living, breathing argument, a modern day argument between a couple. It's literally like watching two people fight in front of your eyes just over a beautiful instrumental. This is just such an interesting concept that works well. And once again, we have Kendrick Lamar pushing the sonic envelope of hip hop. Kendrick's upbringing, of course, really makes Kendrick Lamar who he is today. And we really hear that on the song Mother, Isober, which is a beautiful song of his experiences and trauma growing up from within his family rather than the external influences that were put on him from the outside, which is a very different perspective from what we've typically heard from Kendrick Lamar growing up in Compton and just the people on the outside that surrounded him rather than coming from within his family matters. He talks about how his mom asked him if his cousin touched him in the wrong way, and he honestly answered no, and that wasn't something that was traumatic for him, but what was traumatic was that his mom had to ask these questions and that she didn't believe him even when he told her the truth. And he says, it's kind of like a generational curse. He talks about how slaves were abused and how that has just carried down through generations. But at the end of the song, it's so beautiful because he not only frees himself, but his children from the pain and the hearts filled with hatred and guilt, etc. And it's so profound and very, very strong ending to a song like this. As far as the features go, I thought all of the features provided really great value to this LP. Ghostface Killah was a great addition to Purple Hearts. I really think Sampha and Blxst both killed it on their respective songs between Die Hard and Father Time. I really like how Kendrick adds those melodies to his songs, and it really provides that modern flair that's needed on these Kendrick Lamar tracks. And I also think Kodak Black and Baby Keem put together some of their greatest verses I've honestly ever heard them perform. And I think being on a song with an artist such as Kendrick Lamar makes you have to really perform better. As far as the production goes, I love how live sounding the production is between the strings and the piano throughout the entire album. I think the beats are very Kendrick-esque because I think Kendrick Lamar beats are very unique. I think they're very smooth, and I do think that sonically, this album does sound better than To Pimp a Butterfly. Like, I would come back to this album not only for the lyricism and the wisdom I might gain from Kendrick spitting, but from the sonics of the production. And match that with a penmanship as strong as To Pimp a Butterfly, you have a classic hip hop album. I love the modern twists and instrumentals like Die Hard, Rich Spirit, N95, and Count Me Out. I think those songs go really hard. So you still have something for the younger audience of hip hop. And I think that's what's going to make this album so classic, is that even if you're not the biggest old school fan or you're not the biggest new school fan, I think this album has something for everybody to listen to. All in all, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is a look into Kendrick Lamar's personal life. A look that we don't get to see too often. A look into his upbringing, his family, his relationships. And not only relationships with other here on earth, but with God too. And it's really awesome to see this side of Kendrick Lamar because I feel like this is the first time we really get deep inside of his mind. Rather than hearing just what's going on about the culture or, you know, the political climate or things that are going on in the world, we hear about what's in Kendrick's head and heart and what made him into the man he is today. I think this final TDE project is absolutely amazing, and I think it will be critically acclaimed, and I think this is going to push a lot of first week numbers. I think sonically, when I think of replay value, I think of short 2.5 minute banger songs that can be heard on the radio, but I think this album has so much replay value because of the substance on each song, and people are going to want to go back and re-listen to these songs, not only for the awesome instrumentals throughout the album, but to really get a grip on what Kendrick Lamar is saying here. There's so much substance, it's so profound, and there's just so much to unpack on this album that we're definitely going to need to let it marinate for a long time. This album was worth every second of the wait. And here with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, I think that Kendrick Lamar solidifies why he is the best rapper alive. So with that being said, those are my thoughts of my first listen of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. What did you think of this album? Did you enjoy this album just as much as I did? Are you going to re-listen to this album over and over just like me? Let me know your complete thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming by. Greatly appreciate it. If you liked the video, hit a like and subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 1K subs. Subscribe if you love talking music, listening to music, and making music just as much as I do. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at EJSpark1. And as always, you know what it is. It's peace, love. I love s'mores. EJ, out.